So good afternoon once again. I welcome you all on behalf of the Swiss Indian Chamber of Commerce India and Swiss Business Hub India. Uh, we are together today in association with Nishit Desai and Nishit Desai Associates, who are our knowledge partners for legal and compliance of the chamber. And today we are on a very interesting and not yet jurisprudentially tested topic of product liability with reference to the Consumer Protection Act. So let me introduce our speakers today. We have with us a panel of speakers from Nishit Desai Associates. To start with, we have Gauri Gokhale, who's a practicing lawyer for over 25 years. Gauri leads the IP technology, media and entertainment, data protection law practice at NDA. She has a special focus on consumer protection, having done a master's on the subject. That's interesting. She has advised numerous clients across various industries on issues relating to consumer protection and product liability. The next speaker is Husefa Tabawala, who leads the disruptive technologies practice and heads the Bangalore office of Nishit Desai Associates. Husefa has been advising clients on navigating various legal complications in new age technology, including on consumer protection matters. We next have Aparna Gaur. Aparna Gaur is a senior member of the IP and TMT team at NDA. Aparna frequently advises clients on technology integration and product liability issues, especially in the automotive space. And last but not the least, we have Darren Punan, who is a senior member of the pharmaceutical and life sciences practice at NDA. Darren regularly advises clients in the pharmaceutical, medical device, and food space on various matters, including on consumer protection and product liability. Without taking further time of the audience, let me now hand over to Gauri Gokhale. Welcome, Gauri.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity and welcome all. Uh, Thank you for attending post Diwali. I hope all of us have, enjoyed Diwali after a hiatus of 1 year. I think we were able to go out and enjoy ourselves. Coming back to the topic of today, the reason we chose this topic is in the recent past, we have seen uh, a new jurisprudence developing under the Consumer Protection Act of 2019. And as you may be aware, the first ever consumer protection law we had in India was 1986, almost like 40 years post independence. So from 1986, and when I did my master's, the law was just 10 years, old, or maybe even less than that. So during that period, we had a lot of jurisprudence coming from MRTP, which is the Monopolistic and Restrictive Trade Practices Act, because several of provisions under that law, in fact, also dealt with consumer protection. So in 1986, when we had the Consumer Protection Act, we also had introduction of the Competition Act in 2000. And now what happened was the Consumer Protection Law, which is unfair trade practices, restrictive trade practices, which was prior part of antitrust law, got completely included only under the Consumer Protection Law. And only the vertical, horizontal agreements, abuse of dominance, all these features got included in the under the Competition Act. But when you talk about consumer protection, there are one is the Consumer Protection Act of the new law 2019, but equally the Competition Act also takes into account the consumer benefits and the market conditions for sort of benefits to the consumer, etc., also into account. I thought I'll just sort of give that historical context. Now the question arises, why the new law of 2019? So if we see the statements of objects and reasons, there are several reasons provided there, but one of the interesting reasons is e-commerce. It was the need was felt that the new business models have developed, new technologies have developed, and therefore the law needs revisiting, and therefore they have actually included some of the provisions for e-commerce separately. Probably some other day we can deliberate on this subject, which is of equal importance. The other topic, other topic that they mentioned that the law had to be, evolved further was the product liability. And they have introduced a completely new chapter on product liability. The third important aspect of this new law is the establishment of a regulator. under 1986 Act, we did not have a regulator. What does it mean? That means that when it came to the consumer, rights violation or the consumer protection cases, the consumer had to go to the court, or a consumer protection or a benefit organization or a state could file a complaint with the consumer forum, and only through the judicial process could you resolve the consumer complaints. And in that case also, we rarely saw a state or a central government actually filing cases on behalf of the consumers in way of a class action. Interestingly, the new law also defines consumer rights, such as right to information, right to be protected against hazardous goods, etc. So in that context as well, the government has now established what we call as a Central Consumer Protection Authority, in short CCPA, with wide powers. What does it mean? That means that the CCPA can itself look into violation of consumer rights, misleading advertisements, and remedy those situations by taking a administrative or a quasi judicial action, right? So that means you're not going through the entire channel of dispute resolution mechanism. And we will of course deliberate further on what does it mean in the context of product liability. But this Consumer Protection Authority has already been established. For those who are not aware, it works under, of course, the Consumer Affairs Ministry, and the secretaries, etc., are the chairman, and they do have investigative powers under the act as well, and also the search and seizure powers, and which will mean that the Consumer Protection Authority suo moto, without even a consumer complaint, can initiate a investigation. Suppose they read about, say, people are suffering due to say a certain water that was probably provided, a bottled water, and they read news items that it seems that there was some problem. The Consumer Protect this particular authority can suo moto issue a notice to the the bottled water manufacturer, and investigate into the matter, right? This was not possible before, and this is a very, very important development. With that background, let us jump straight into the product liability, which is the topic of today's discussion. Here, I'm going to request Huzefa. And interestingly, even before the new law came in, I remember Huzefa and I had written a paper on product liability years back. I don't know whether Huzefa you remember, but that time, of course, we were going more under the tort law, etc., and not straight as a strict liability under the Consumer Protection Act. So Huzefa, over to you to discuss and deliberate about what does it mean by product liability now under the 2019 Act. And interestingly, I also want you to cover, because this one question constantly comes up, right? As to when there is a foreign manufacturer or a foreign party involved in the supply of goods into India, whether, what liabilities can a foreign manufacturer face in India as well? So over to you, Huzefa.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for this introduction. I think from a touch point, right? I think as Gauri has set the context, it will be very important, for our audience to understand that what is product liability per se. Now, it has been defined, under the Consumer Protection Act. I'll just simplify. I'll not kind of, read the full definition for you. It essentially says that there is a responsibility of a product manufacturer or a product seller to compensate a consumer for any harm which is caused by a defective product. Now, there are 3-4 interesting touch points out here. One, who does this extend to when it comes from a liability attribution perspective? The definition says a product manufacturer or a product seller, and an extension to this is also a product service provider. So these are the 3 parties which kind of get covered within this umbrella. The second touch point is they have used the word harm, that when there is a harm caused towards the consumer, so that is also very important touch points. So I'm just touching on the key elements out here. So one, the attribution of liability, which is extended to a product manufacturer, product seller, or a product service provider. The second one is that when there is any harm caused to the consumer. And third, when there is in relation to a defective product. Now, interestingly, the concept of product liability does not extend to pure play services. It is only in relation to products, or a product service provider who is someone who's providing services in relation to a product. So the main objective is the product, and there is some sort of ancillary services in relation to the product. So the first question comes is that who's a product manufacturer or a product seller? It is quite widely defined under the Consumer Protection Act. A product manufacturer is, of course, someone who not only manufactures the goods, but it is someone who assembles the goods. It also covers someone who actually is putting his or her mark when it comes to selling of the goods, somebody who's designing, fabricating. So the definition is quite wide. Similarly, with the logical extension of who's a product seller, vis-a-vis the term, the obvious is someone who sells the product, but it also extends to distribution, leases, somebody who actually imports the products. And in cases, a product manufacturer also can be a product seller. And similarly, a product service provider I mentioned earlier is someone who's actually providing services in relation to the product per se. Now, the second interesting thing which comes is what is harm. That entire concept of product liability is on this fulcrum point that there is a compensation when there is a harm to the consumer. Now, harm in its literal sense is not only in relation to loss of property or damage in relation to the product itself, but it could be an extension. Say example, if you're using a certain machinery, a complex machinery, in your house, an appliance, and that particular appliance in your kitchen kind of catches fire and it kind of does damage to property within the house. So harm is also extended to loss, which is caused by the product to third-party products in this simple house example. It also extends to injury and illness which is caused to the consumer. So if a consumer is take this electrical example, a grinder in the kitchen, and or is driving an automobile for personal use, and is there some sort of an illness basis or defect, that is where also harm extends to. And the last bit is more interesting. It also the law also recognizes compensation in relation to mental agony or emotional distress. So that is also included within the definition of harm. So we have tackled what a product manufacturer, product seller, or a PSP, which is a product service provider, those are the parties to whom liability can be attributed. We've also spoken about harm, that is compensation can be for certain harm. And then the third fulcrum point, which is the most interesting, is that harm has to rise or is in relation to a defect of a product. Now, the law also gets into what is a defect of a product. Defect of a product could simply mean in relation to shortcomings, if any, basis any particular law. If there is any contractual agreement vis-a-vis the consumer, and the seller of the product or the manufacturer of the product, a breach of that. It also gets into if there are any sort of express or implied representations which have been made, by the product manufacturer or a seller. So you see these ads, newspaper ads, or just general representations which are made that say, I'll give you a simple example, like a battery. A normal pencil battery, somebody says that it's going to last for 25 hours if it is used in this thing. So there may not be a written contract, but even marketing mechanisms where there is an express commitment made, and if it is not upheld, would lead to a defect. Of course, under the Consumer Protection Act, there are specific categories in relation to when it comes to a product manufacturer, what liabilities are there. When it comes to a product seller, what liabilities are there. But we will discuss this going forward. Not taking too long, the last question which Gauri mentioned is, how does the Act look at foreign manufacturers? Now, interestingly, the law, the Act per se, the parent legislation, does not specifically have extraterritorial jurisdiction. They've not recognized it, but the law is kind of silent. They don't demarcate between domestic manufacturers or domestic product sellers. However, interestingly, there is a particular section, under the whole product liability chapter, where they have attributed liability to a product seller in cases where it is difficult to reach out to an overseas manufacturer, or if somebody is importing a particular product and the name or the identity of the manufacturer is unknown, could be a foreign manufacturer, or in situations even if the identity of the foreign manufacturer is known, but it's literally impossible to go and enforce certain rights. In those cases, the law actually recognizes liability to kind of get attributed to the product seller. So this is a very interesting nuance, though the actual defect, the categories of defect which I mentioned may be attributable to the manufacturer, but in some cases where the identity is not known, or it is difficult for the consumer to go and enforce something against that foreign manufacturer, the attribution can move to the product seller. So this is kind of giving a protection to the consumer in India itself. And before I conclude, one interesting point, and when Gauri opened the session, she mentioned about commerce. We get a lot of questions as to can there be any sort of liability attributed to marketplaces, for example, in the traditional commerce world? The question is that a marketplace per se is not selling the goods to the buyer, and the buyer are not buying the goods from the marketplace in a simple marketplace model. The buy and sell is happening between the seller of the goods on the marketplace and an independent buyer, which let's assume we'll call him the consumer. But interestingly, the way the law defines product seller, it also extends to people or entities which are involved in packaging and providing services in relation to the product itself. So there is a possibility that marketplaces who are providing logistics services, for example, or marketplaces who are providing packaging services in relation to the product, and if they are perishable consumer items, for example, milk or curd, or cheese, and the marketplace is also providing storage sort of facilities. In that capacity, there is a possibility that liability may get attributed to them under two umbrellas, providing services to the product itself. So they could, wear the hat of a product service provider, or kind of fit in the definition of product seller on a case-to-case basis. So, Gauri, this was just a general overview. Over to you.
Thank you, Huzefa, for that complete background in such a descriptive manner. Since you have explained now what does product liability mean and when can the liability get attributed, Aparna, why don't you explain in terms of if at all there is a product liability issue, how can the complaint be initiated, role of CCPA, which I briefly mentioned, as well as the reliefs that that can be granted by the relevant authorities and the courts.
Right. So Gauri, if you see the definition of complainant under the CPA, right, it's very broad. So it not only includes a consumer, and a consumer is someone who actually buys a product, who pays a consideration and buys a product, and this excludes purchase for commercial purposes. So that's a consumer. Obviously, that will be the most obvious answer. Apart from a consumer, there are certain other types, other manners in which a complaint can be initiated, right? One is in case there are certain registered consumer organizations, associations. If one of those associations can also file, initiate an action for product liability. Other than that, interestingly, there is also a possibility of a class action in case where there are there's a large number of consumers who have similar interests, and all of them have the same grievance. They can also come together and file a class action for a product liability action. Apart from that, and I think this one is the most important, is a case where the central government, the state government, or the CCPA, which is the authority under the CPA 2019, they can on their own initiate an action for product liability. Now this becomes very important because sometimes even in a case where there could be harm, a lot of times the consumer would not come forth and file an action. But in case there are reports, news reports or something like that, that a product has been malfunctioning or something has been happening, the government or the CCPA itself can take action under the the provisions for product liability. So I think that's one very important aspect that businesses should understand, that it's not just a consumer, but also, basis reports, etc. Proceedings can be initiated. Coming to the point of what reliefs can be claimed in a product liability action, and those sort of actions that can be taken against a manufacturer or a seller, etc. The first one is obviously the compensation that could be granted. This would be compensation for harm. Currently, under the CPA, there's no, how there are similar laws such as the Motor Vehicles Act, etc., where for certain types of injuries, for instance, if there's death or loss of a limb, etc., there's there's already computation of how damages are to be awarded. Right now, that's not the end of the CPA, but it's yet to be seen. Since it's a new law, it's yet to be seen what happens there and how this will be dealt with. Possibly, something similar could, once this grows, this area grows, maybe something similar could be devised. Other than compensation, there are several other things that could be the several other reliefs that could be there. One is recall of the products, replacement, in case it's been filed by a consumer, so replacement of the defective product, or just or repayment to the consumer of the price that they've paid for it. Other than that, I think importantly, a few things that are also important with the that other reliefs that are possible. If there is a finding that the product itself is hazardous in nature, then in that case, there could be an order that the manufacturer simply has to stop manufacturing that product, which could be, that could really affect businesses in a negative manner. So that's also something to be mindful of, that, that product liability is not just, vis-a-vis a consumer. There could be large scale issues. I mean, that like the impact could be really large on the business.
Thank you. That's very helpful. So I think, interestingly, you mentioned about the quantum of damages, right? And we have seen, in the recent past, we had done some comparative work. For example, you do have computation under the Motor Vehicles Act, and under the clinical trials. Darren and I had done some assessment as to the manner of computation. And there have been a lot of criticism in the past also, that the Consumer Protection Code, or the, or the commissions, are not giving enough compensation to the consumers, right? So we need to see whether under the product liability, now there is a clear identification of the three harms that Huzefa mentioned, right? For those harms, how will the computation develop? And if you just flip it from a company perspective, right? Because the companies also have to do some assessment in case of, there is actually a damage. So nobody willingly wants to provide a defective product. But should there be a case, what is that quantum that is likely to be awarded? It's very difficult to, sort of visualize. So if the government is able to, provide certain formula the way they have done under other acts, that will be definitely a good, sort of, at least, both ways. From a consumer perspective also, there is some certainty, as well as for the businesses, they are able to visualize. We also mentioned about the CCPA, right? As I said, CCPA itself can take action in case of, hazardous products, but there the CCPA doesn't have the power to grant damages or compensation. CCPA can simply, ask for stop sale or, a recall, right? But the compensation will have to be given only or determined only by the commission. So that's a slight distinction I thought, I'll bring to the table. I think Huzefa did mention about various entities in the supply chain, or all the stakeholders that are, involved and who could be liable. But the act does provide as to how the liability could be allocated between all these stakeholders. So Darren, why don't you explain how does the law visualizes, the allocation, and whether contractually parties, can sort of arrive at certain arrangements? Should there be a liability claim, how inter say the parties will have to resolve their claims? So could you just sort of elaborate on that, Darren?
Sure. Thanks, Gauri. So, as you mentioned, it's actually a very good thing that the CPA 2019, it actually does distinguish between the product manufacturer, the product seller, as well as the product service provider, because the law itself believes and it shows that there is an intent to distinguish between the responsibilities between each of these parties. And very clearly, it has laid down what instances for each stakeholder in their entire supply chain the responsibility is going to be attributed. And I'll go through each quickly. So first of all, when it comes to product manufacturers, they would be held responsible for certain activities that take place at their end. For example, if there was a manufacturing defect, to give you an example of how that could be, if you were to purchase a laptop and the laptop comes dead on arrival, or if a component of that laptop, for example, the battery comes dead on arrival, that would be considered a defect in the manufacturing that took place, and therefore a claim can arise against the manufacturer of that particular product. There could also be a situation where the product is defective in the design, and I'll distinguish this from the manufacturing process, because while the manufacturing process may have come out fine, if the design of the product itself is defective, that can also lead to a claim. And to give you an example, in the medical device space, for example, if you have an implant that is reacting with the body, and basically not enough testing was done to show that there is no compatibility with the tissues or other organs of the body. In such a case, that would be a defect in the actual design of the product itself, and therefore that could also lead to a particular situation of product liability. We also have a situation where if the manufacturer has deviated from the manufacturing process, for example, if again, I'll give you a medical device example. If you're having a product which has different sizes, and you decide, I mean, in one package, you say that the size of the package is so and so, that becomes the manufacturing specification for that package. And if upon purchase, the surgeon or whoever opens that package and they find out that it's a completely different size, then that would be a deviation from the manufacturing specification itself. Then we have a situation where if the manufacturer is not able to conform to an express warranty provided. To give you an example, if the manufacturer is saying that the battery of a particular product will be lasting for these many years, and that's an express warranty that's been made by the manufacturer, and in such a case, if it does not happen, then again action can lie against the manufacturer itself. And lastly, the other angle that is provided within the law itself is where adequate instructions or warnings to prevent harm were not provided by the manufacturer itself. And this is particularly important because if it could be a household equipment, or it could be a complicated surgical equipment or otherwise. If the adequate instructions for use of that product is not provided, and because of that absence of that instruction, there was a particular harm caused, then it could also lead to a product liability claim. To give you a very simple example, if I were to purchase a coffee machine and that coffee machine didn't come with an instruction manual saying that I shouldn't be adding water once the machine is on, and that leads to an issue, then there itself a product liability claim can arise. Then we have situations where the product service provider can be held responsible. And these, and again, to distinguish or to put it in perspective, the service provider for a product is limited to those services which are in connection with the product itself. So in a situation where a service provider provided a faulty or imperfect service, then if it's not as per the contract agreed between the consumer as well as the product service provider, that also can lead to a situation where you have a claim. Then if there was any act or omission or negligence in terms of the service being provided, then in such a situation also you can have a situation of a product liability claim. And even in the service provider situation, even they are responsible for making sure that adequate instructions or warnings are provided to prevent harm. And if that's not issued, then they can also be responsible. And to give you a very simple example here, so when I purchased a washing machine for the house, when the delivery of that washing machine and the installation of that washing machine was done by a service provider, the delivery bolts in the washing machine was not taken out. And neither was I instructed that it should be taken out, which led to a situation where that washing machine was not functioning properly. Of course, in this case, there was no harm caused, but it is a situation where instructions were not provided at the time by the service provider itself. And of course, if the service provider is providing some sort of an express warranty on the service, and that does not conform, then in that case also we can arise a situation can arise. For example, if a part is replaced by a service provider and the service provider says that this particular part will last you for the next 6 months, and it does not, then in such a situation also you can. Product sellers are also given or attributed certain liabilities, and this is especially when we look at situations where the product seller adds on to or modifies or alters the product itself. And in such situations, the product seller can be responsible if they have actually put in something additional to what the manufacturer has already done, of course, without the instructions of the manufacturer itself. Or, where a product seller provides a warranty which is over and above what the manufacturer is able to provide. In such a situation, the liability for that part of that warranty will fall on the product seller and not the product manufacturer. So in this way, very clearly, they have been able to distinguish who is responsible for what along the entire supply chain. But the question that comes up in many occasions is that in this day and age, most products are assembled by one manufacturer at the end of the day, but it may have multiple components coming from very different manufacturers. And this is obviously very common in the automobile space, where you have parts coming from many different manufacturers. So from a CPA liability point of view, the likelihood of the action arising against the main manufacturer, who is the consumer-facing manufacturer, is highest, because the consumer is aware of that manufacturer and they're the ones who put it out in the market. However, on the back end, as Gauri had also mentioned, you may have contractual obligations with your component manufacturers, saying that if a particular part of that product is the cause of a particular issue, then in that case you are either to indemnify in the form of defending me in court if something were to come up, or in any case, because of the way the product manufacturer is defined under the law, it can include the manufacturer of the whole product or of a component itself. So they can actually be implemented within the product liability claim itself. So in that way, what becomes important is to be able to understand from an expert evidence point of view, as well as, and this is where we will talk about technical experts as well, to be able to really determine what was the cause and effect of that particular issue in question. So I think with that, Gauri, I'll hand it back to you.
Absolutely, thanks for that, elucidation, that you have given. And, especially when the products are getting more and more complex, plus the components being sourced, as you rightly said. Now, today, world is your market and world is your, supply chain as well, right? So when there is so much coming from different parts of the world, and then in one jurisdiction, you have the liability consolidating, how will that pan out? That also visualization is extremely important. I think one question that I've seen, and I'm requesting Darren and Aparna also to quickly check out the questions. I'll just take one of them. It says that if FMCG product contains a disclaimer that liability remitted to product replacement, right? Now, in our view at least, and we need to see how the jurisprudence evolves, but a product liability claim, which is harm-based claim under the Consumer Protection Act, is an absolute liability. So that means if the disclaimers will not override that, right? So in spite of a disclaimer, when there is a harm cause, so this disclaimer may apply if there is no harm, right? So if you say that if it's a defective product and I will never give you a refund, I will only replace it, that is fine. To that extent, it is fine. But you can't say if there is a harm caused, I will not, I will not probably give you a compensation. That kind of a disclaimer won't work. Of course, whether the Consumer Protection Authority even upholds this disclaimer or not, we will need to examine. But overall, from a compensation perspective, disclaimers are not going to work. That is our sense after looking at the entire provisions of the law. In the meantime, if Darren, you can look at other questions. Aparna, if you can come in here and explain the defenses available. We discussed when the liability will come up, and how the liability gets allocated, but of course there are defenses available. So why don't you just explain quickly, what defenses are available to the relevant stakeholders?
Sure. So the law itself provides for certain exceptions to product liability claims, and I'll discuss a few of them. And there are some certain other defenses that can be taken. So the exceptions that are provided under law, one of them is in case a claim is made against a product seller. In case the product seller is able to establish that when the harm was caused, the product was either altered or misused or modified. In that case, there will not be any liability for the product seller. In case of a product manufacturer, in case your claim relates to a situation where uh, the complaint states that you did not provide adequate warnings, there are certain situations in which the product manufacturer is able to claim an exception. One is a situation where, for instance, this is an employer-employee situation where an employer buys a product for a workplace, and the employees are using the product, and adequate warnings have been given to the employer, and even then there's some harm is caused, and under this provision that adequate warning was not given, there's a complaint that's made. The manufacturer can take the defense that the adequate warnings were provided to the manufacturer, to the employer, sorry. The other thing, and I think this one is very important in cases where, in industries where different components are being provided by different players in the in the market. For instance, a situation, mobile manufacturing, where certain chips are provided by separate different manufacturers, or EVs today, where batteries are provided by a certain manufacturer, and the EVs being manufactured by someone else. The situation where, I'll give an example and explain this one. For instance, there's a battery manufacturer, and the battery manufacturer has provided the battery to the EV manufacturer, and while during this purchase, they've given a warning, adequate warnings have been given as to how the product has to be used, etc. And the EV manufacturer does not pay attention to those warnings, and manufactures a product due to which a harm is caused due to the battery itself. The battery manufacturer can take the defense that adequate warnings were given when the product was sold to the EV manufacturer. So that's a defense that can be taken, I think, an important one today, when different components are being manufactured by different parties. Other than this, there are also other defenses that could be taken. For instance, if a consumer has filed a complaint, if you can show that the person who's filed a complaint is actually not a consumer at all. For instance, the product has been purchased for commercial purposes, or if the no harm has been caused. Like Huzaifar mentioned, there is a lot of emphasis. I mean, the entire claim actually it relies upon harm being caused. So if you can establish that no harm was caused due to the product, that could also be a defense to the action.
Yeah, thank you. I think Darren did briefly mention about the evidence part, but overall, when there are complex products, right? If it's a simple product, to establish defect is quite easy. But when there are complex products, what you have given certain examples, that the example that you gave of the EV, right? So in such situations, how is the evidence led before the courts? The consumer forums is going to be very important, and there the role of experts, etc., will come in. Though there is a possibility that the consumer commissions are allowed to refer the matter to experts for their sort of examination and giving report, etc. Which experts are selected? Is the product manufacturer able to give an independent evidence as well of an independent expert, right? So all these things are going to be very interesting to see how they evolve. Unfortunately, the functioning of the consumer forums in India in the last few years, has been marred with vacancies and things like that. So the Supreme Court, in fact, a couple of weeks back said that, the vacancies need to be filled up. So when we do have, sufficient infrastructure available, but that is the court or the commission infrastructure. But other than that, expert infrastructure also will be equally important in the product liability claims. So in that context, coming back to the CCPA point, I feel we should spend a couple of minutes there, definitely, though we briefly have discussed it. But if you can, put everything together, Darren, so that the audience understands how can the CCPA investigate, what role that they can play. You can just bring all the points together, maybe it will be very helpful.
Sure, Gauri. So that's a valid question. So the CCPA, as a regulatory body, has been given quite a lot of power, and not only is it an investigative and inquiry body, it is also able to come to a conclusion as to whether there has been a violation of certain consumer rights, if there has been any unfair trade practice, or if advertisements or marketing material with respect to a particular product has been misleading in some form, right? And to that extent, the CCPA is able to act on its own, meaning it can suo moto start an investigation in and of itself. And what it has is basically it has its own investigative wing, and that investigative wing is able to hold, or investigate as to whether there has been a particular violation of a consumer right. And the primary consumer right that we look at when it comes to product liability is where the consumers have a right against hazardous products or products that can cause harm, and especially the marketing of those products in the country, right? So because of that consumer right, automatically the CCPA is able to take action in the event that they find through their investigative process that a certain product is defective or it's hazardous in nature. And in such cases, what happens is that the CCPA is able to issue show cause notices and actually, engage with the relevant stakeholder, be it the product manufacturer, seller, or the service provider, and come to a conclusion after this entire investigative exercise to determine if there has been a certain violation or not. If there has been a violation, the CCPA is given the authority to issue orders with respect to recalling of those products, or if they want, they can also issue orders with respect to reimbursement or asking the manufacturer, seller, or service provider to actually discontinue a practice which they believe to be unfair or prejudicial to the consumer interest. And in such situations, it's also important to know that the CCPA is also entrusted with filing their own consumer complaints before the Consumer Commission. And this is where it's important, as Gauri had mentioned, while the CCPA cannot by themselves issue damages against any sort of a consumer violation, what they can do is file before the consumer forum, who is then entrusted with being able to issue orders with respect to damages as well. So all in all, the CCPA is able to investigate, inquire. They're able to show cause to manufacturers, products, service providers, and sellers. And at the same time, they're able to issue directions or raise the entire dispute before a consumer commission as well. So that's more or less what the CCPA is able to do, Gauri.
Thank you. And just for the audience, the CCPA is active in the during, I mean, they have definitely taken action against misleading advertisements on various digital platforms. They have been issuing notices. In the pandemic, they also had taken actions vis-a-vis the advertisements in relation to the products that were claiming some COVID-related reliefs or benefits, etc. Right? So it's an active body. We need to wait and watch when they start taking up issues, if any, around product liability. There is also a line called National Consumer Helpline, which has been established, and complaints by telephone are received by this helpline. So this helpline, what the helpline does is, before actually escalating the matter, they converse with the relevant companies and try to see if the issues can be resolved. And if the issues cannot be resolved, then then of course there could be an escalation. But that is where the companies can become members of the National Consumer Helpline, so that they are able to have this dialogue going. So that is one other element I thought I will also clarify. The other aspect, which often is questioned, is that sorry, but Darren, there is a question for you on the implant. If you can just look at that question, and I'll come back to you, once I've asked question to Aparna. So Aparna, we discussed about, the waiver. Can the consumer right be the for the product liability be waived? And I did answer that question. But I think the other question also arises is whether there can be a tort action in a civil court, or is it only product liability, which otherwise you could have gone to the court, and now you do have Consumer Protection Act. So can you explain the interplay here?
Right. So in fact, the Consumer Protection Act specifically states that the law is in addition to and is not in derogation of any other law. So the intent of the legislature is also to ensure that, while there is an action before the consumer commissions that a consumer can have, I think a separate tort action could also be possible at the same time. Obviously, this is not something that's been tested till date. Uh, but in my view, since it's clear from the wording of the law itself that there's no conflict between CPA and other laws, it should be possible to have simultaneous proceedings.
Right. Darren, do you just want to explain for the audience the question and then answer that, please?
Yeah, sure. Very good question that was asked. In a situation where a doctor purchases an implant and it is found that the implant is reacting with the patient's body, can the patient file a product liability claim directly against the manufacturer? And if the patient initiates a negligence case against the doctor, can the doctor shift the liability to the product manufacturer? So, good question. So, the way in which we would look at this is that you can take up a action before the consumer forum in respect of deficiency of services, etc., against the doctor itself. And in such a situation, it's not as though a product liability claim is tagged differently because they are all handled by the same forum, which is before the consumer forum itself. So in that case, if the doctor believes that the issue arose not from his or her services rendered in terms of implanting that particular implant, then in that case, yes, the doctor can implead the manufacturer on the basis of evidence showing that the defect is with the actual product and not with the service rendered for that particular product. So in such a situation, yes, the doctor can shift the liability, but the determination of whether the liability was on the doctor or on the manufacturer would be actually something that the consumer forum will have to take a call on finally. And this is where the role of those technical experts and expert evidence comes very handy. And maybe we can cover that also shortly.
Why don't you go ahead? No, why
Sure.
why don't you go ahead?
Yeah. So usually what happens is that, I'll pick it up from a CCPA point of view, and I'll also talk about it from a regular consumer forum point of view. So in the CCPA itself, the CCPA is entrusted with the ability to call upon expert, technical experts who have particular subject matter knowledge. And this is important from the investigation point of view, because at the time of investigation, especially when it comes to technical matters, it is important that the CCPA picks up on these kinds of experts to determine whether there has been a certain violation or not. In fact, on the side of the manufacturer, if such a act is not done by the CCPA and the CCPA passes an order without the use of a technical expert, it can actually be used as an argument to the extent that for such technical matters it needs to be examined by a technical expert. But apart from this, there is also a statutory provision that's provided when it comes to a consumer forum itself under product liability action, where in cases where you actually need to be able to test to determine whether there is a defect or not, there are labs which are going to be recognized by the commissions, and those recognized laboratories are required to provide a report on the basis of their examination of the product and whether they believe that there is a defect or not, and produce this report to the Consumer Commission for their determination. There is even a timeline prescribed for that particular instance, 45 days unless extended by the Commission, which actually needs to be taken into consideration. This report can be contested by both the manufacturer as well as the complainant, and that's where the role of independent experts also come into the picture, because it is possible for the manufacturer, not only in terms of their documentation that show that the product was of a particular specification, but if you are able to bring in your own expert witness to show that, in certain situations, if the product was used in so and so manner, the event or the causality of that particular event could only have taken place because of consumer negligence and not because of the product, is one instance that the technical expert can determine. And in these situations, you can either get the liability shifted back to the complainant, or in certain situations use it as a defense itself.
That's very, very, sort of helpful to know. And I just want to add one other thing. When CCPA is investigating and if they find that, this is a matter to be handled by a particular regulator. For example, if it's a medical device example that was pointed out here, if they believe that, the CDSCO is the right authority to look into this further, the CCPA can actually direct, such a thing to the regulator, right? If there is an auto related, if there is a regulator, so basically they have that power to refer the matter as well. And interestingly, from the question that has come in, which is slightly related, which I'll take here, it says, how will a use of non-stick cookware, which is now known to be carcinogenic, will result in the light of new Consumer Protection Act? A very interesting question. The issue really here is ultimately from a product liability perspective, the harm has to be called, the defect, etc. Now, what happens is, if a product, the use of, say, for example, non-stick, whichever the product is being used to make the the cookware non-stick, if that product has not been banned in India, right? Technically, you can still manufacture and sell that product. So therefore, the question will arise that whether CCPA can actually take the initiative to do all the investigation and actually recommend that such a product should be discontinued, right? So till such time that establishment of a actual, there may be such reports, but what is the duration of the use? And, it's dependent on too many, factors. And if the government has not banned it, then obviously, unless there is a specific cookware, which is, more, which where there is an evidence that can be established, with the data, only then, the consumer protection, the authority or the, commissions can take action. Typically, these are matters handled through PILs, as you may be aware, which is a public interest litigation, because this requires a change in law for banning a particular product. I hope that adequately answers your question. The next quick question I will take, and I'm requesting, we have 5 minutes left. So requesting Aparna and Darren to check out other questions as well. So one other question I'll take, which is relating to the misleading advertisements, though not directly relating to the topic, but an interesting one, is that with the advent of CCPA, what is the role of ASCII? So you're right that now one can actually, the consumers, and we have actually seen that happen, consumers are complaining to the National Consumer Helpline or to CCPA about misleading advertisements, and the CCPA has begun to issue, as I gave an example about COVID products, right? They have started issuing show cause notices already to the to the body. So ASCII is more of self-regulatory. Only in relation to television ads it is mandatory, but this CCPA orders will have a statutory binding nature, and therefore you may actually see in large cases or important cases that CCPA may play more active role than ASCII. Darren, Aparna, do you want to take any quick question here?
Yeah, maybe I can take Adeline's question on specific clauses which service providers, resellers can have in their contracts with manufacturers, etc., to reduce the liability. So there are two ways to look at it. What can manufacturers do to reduce liability when it comes to service providers, and what can service providers do when there is liability attributed to them against manufacturers, right? So in the instance for manufacturers, I'll give you an example. If there is a specific clause that says that there should be no modification or alteration of the product, you cannot use any marketing material which is not permitted, which is not otherwise permitted by the manufacturer. The manufacturer is limiting their liability because if, for example, the product seller says, okay, I can do this and this, then it's very clear that this is an unauthorized marketing of a particular product, which is not something that the manufacturer intended at all. And in such a situation, showing that contractually also I have agreed with the seller that this is not going to be the case, it is very clear that if the seller has done something of that nature, then it is the seller's fault or liability with respect to those additional claims. The other way around is, especially in situations which even Josefa was talking about, where you're dealing with imported products and you're selling an imported product. Here, the indemnity becomes very important, because while the claim may be against the product seller in such a situation, because the importer is outside of India, your indemnification claim will help you with managing any costs or liabilities that arise in the event that you are held to task because of a manufacturing issue. So in those situations, a very specific indemnity that covers all the issues that can arise from a manufacturing process point of view should be covered from an indemnity standpoint, so that in that event that you are held responsible for one of those activities, you can be indemnified for that situation.
Thank you for that. I'll take one. I know we have just 2 minutes left and we do need to wrap up. Overall, there are several other questions. What we could probably do is we will just respond to you all one-on-one. We'll just take these questions, copy these questions. I'm requesting our administrator to copy these questions. Please wait for a couple of days to hear from us. There is one quick question I will take is the financial product, which is the last question. Just to clarify, the products that we are talking here are all tangible products and the liabilities attached to that. Financial product should be considered as more as a service, and therefore, of course, still will be governed, because your question really is whether IRDA versus CCPA. But if there is a service being provided, and there is a liability vis-a-vis that service, though not a product liability claim per se, but a consumer complaint can still lie if there is a deficiency in the service. Because if you see the definition of service, it includes provision of facilities in connection with banking, financing, insurance, transport, etc., right? So therefore, under the deficiency of service, a claim can lie. Sorry, but we cannot take all the other questions. There is a lot of enthusiasm I can see here. But we are coming close to the end of the session. So I hand it back to Mr.
You
Lal.
can extend it by a few minutes if you want. There's no problem.
Sure. So Aparna and Darren, do you have any additional questions that you can see here you want to quickly take? I'll just take one quick question here. I'll just read it out. It says, who is responsible to determine whether or not the right person, that is manufacturer, seller, service provider, is litigated against, especially since there is a possibility to file the suit against the seller if the manufacturer cannot be traced? So a very interesting question. So typically what will happen from a consumer perspective, they will go to the first protocol, right? That the person from whom you have bought the product, right? Or if the manufacturer is not known, as you have given in your example, then what will happen is, once I file a complaint, if I have filed against a wrong party or that party believes that I'm not the right party, typically in their response, they will call out and say that I'm not the right party. And then they will basically disclose the name of the right party that against whom the proceeding should continue. And then there could be an amendment to the pleadings where a relevant party is brought, in the proceedings, and then you can continue the proceeding against that particular party. Then the next question is, are there any specific clauses which a service provider or reseller can in their contracts with manufacturer, seller, client, consumer? Did we take this question? We have.
Yeah, Gauri, I think Darren answered this one.
Yes. So just give us a a quick 30-second to quickly see which questions are pending.
Yeah, maybe I can take up Siddharth's question.
Sure.
On he's asked, the definition of goods means movable property and includes food but not drugs. So will drugs also get covered? The answer is yes, because there is a separate definition for product. And products contain not just goods, but also articles. And in that situation, it's not necessary that only because from the ambit of goods it has been excluded that drugs and medical device will not get covered. I'm just reading the rest of that question. The central authority has powers to recall goods, which is done after investigation. If a product is recalled but due to wrong reasons, will the government provide indemnification to the product manufacturer later on if product liability case is filed against the product manufacturer for the reason? Yeah, I think the answer to that is no. Of course, I mean, since we're dealing with government bodies, see, while there are opportunities to appeal and challenge a particular order issued against a manufacturer, especially if there's a direction to recall, if obviously we can't look at a situation where the government can be held responsible for indemnifying in the event. But that's why the appeal process is present for us to be able to challenge that particular order. So you take it up with the National Commission or subsequently the Supreme Court to be able to challenge that particular issue.
Yeah, thanks for that. And often there is also a possibility of a stay, because while you're appealing, the question arises that whether, because if you're filing an appeal, the authority may also be able to stay the operation of the order in the meantime. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe Asta's question on onus to prove defect, that will lie with the manufacturer. I mean, or depends. I mean, manufacturer, product service provider, or the seller. And at what stage? At least from a statutory point of view, right at the beginning of the claim itself, you have the opportunity to be able to send that entire product for testing, because that really determines. And that report will determine whether or not that claim will lie. So the entire process itself is put down in a way, and there is no separate stage as such where the expert opinion is supposed to be put in. But of course, the evidence stage would be the best opportunity for presenting that case.
Right. So I think there are two stages, right? I mean, two separate authorities, just to illustrate that further. One is before the CCPA. If at all there is an investigation, obviously the CCPA first will conduct the investigation. If only they're satisfied, will they issue a show cause notice. So you obviously have a right to rebut. Then the next, before the authority, again, it is first for the consumer to at least first discharge the initial burden, as we call it, right, to demonstrate. Because it's going to be very difficult from an evidentiary perspective if I'm calling for, say, property damage, right? The example that Huzefa had given. I should be able to, have the immediate photographs taken, have I as a consumer done all of that? If I've not done all of that, with some witness or something, tomorrow, the sanctity of that evidence also can get challenged, right? So we'll need to wait and watch as to how, this entire jurisprudence develops. I think we have covered all the questions.
Yeah, I think Colonel Chandok had a question on quantification, which we have covered. Right now, we don't have a lot of jurisprudence on how exactly the claims can be measured or quantified. So that's a real wait and watch situation, Colonel. But yeah, I mean, it's for anybody to pick up right now.
Okay, I guess there is one last question that has come. Damage to the property because his product did not even share the product sample test. Can you just check this last question, and then we can hand it over back to Mr.
Yeah, I've just answered it. So if the consumer doesn't really give evidence along with their complaint, the commission actually has the power to even reject a complaint and not even admit a complaint. And also the commission has the power to call for a sample of the product that's that's caused the harm and send it to a laboratory for testing, etc. So those powers are there. If it's a completely bogus complaint, then most likely it will get rejected.
Sure, thank you. So thank you all for being with us through this session and all the interesting questions you have asked. Hopefully we have answered all of them, but if you do have any follow-up questions, we'll be happy to answer them. Do reach out to us, and we'll be, we can even have a quick call if, something needs more explanation. With that, I hand it over back to Mr. Lad, and we thank the consulate for overall giving us the chamber to give us this opportunity to partner with them. And also, I understand that some members of consulate as well had also participated. So thanks to them as well. So over to you, Mr. Lad.
Thank you so much, Gauri, and the entire NDA team. It was a very comprehensive coverage of this topic, which, as you rightly said, has not tested jurisprudence so far. I mean, you covered every aspect as to when a product liability can be attributed, what are the different arms, the manufacturer, the seller, the service provider, what can be I mean, quantum of damages. You have very clearly said that it is yet to be tested as to what would be the maximum quantum, or whether that could be really seen how it's going to be enforced henceforth. And as well as what reliefs can be claimed, you've also advised us as to what are the defenses which the person against whom the complaint has been made can raise. Very good coverage. And what is interesting was that even the government and the CCPA can take these claims suo motu. So one should not feel that only a consumer has to complain. Even the government itself or the CCPA itself can take up a complaint against this act. So thank you so much. My one question for you all, that when you say no harm is caused, does it mean that only if a harm is caused, then the product is defective, or if the product is? But then what happens? Somebody can like the example which he gave of the washing machine, right? The product is defective. I mean, is it harm is bodily harm, or it's even financial harm?
So
Because his machine
basically,
not being affected, it's a financial harm.
that's true. So basically, first of all, let me clarify that when there is a defect and if there is no harm, even then a consumer complaint can lie, of course, for the defect.
Right.
Right? Now, if the harm is caused, then there is a product liability claim as well as a part of that entire claim. So I will make a claim for a defective product as well as a product liability, because within it's an umbrella claim of product liability, within which also I'll have reliefs for replacement, etc. But in addition to that, I will have compensation as well, right, for the harm. So it is so that's what I thought. I'll just clarify.
And this compensation is only for bodily harm, or it can be even for harm in any way?
No, as Josefa mentioned, it is mental agony, emotional distress, etc. as well.
So financial harm can be leading to mental agony.
Yeah, that we need to see how the jurisprudence evolves. You're right. It's an interesting question. We need to see how the jurisprudence evolves for that.
It
Great.
could
Thank
be
you so
damage
much.
to property as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Good. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining in this evening. And we had more than 100 participants at the start, and I'm very happy that we could cover such a topic. Thank you to the Swiss Business Hub for joining us in this webinar, and thanks NDA, and look forward for more webinars with you, and also the entire audience. Stay tuned for our next webinar, which is going to be on the patent law, and we'll very soon update you all about it. Thank you so much. Have a nice evening.
Have a good evening.
you.
Thank you.